Here's a technique for doing great barbecue-style ribs indoors, in the oven. It's stupid easy. Any kind of ribs would work, but at my butcher, they often have a few beef back ribs for sale. It's a byproduct of boneless ribeye steaks. It's great meat, it's cheap, and 3 is enough for my dinner. As you can see, these came cut into individual ribs. Even if I was buying a whole intact rack of ribs, I would still cut them into individual bones before cooking them. You just get more surface area that way, more browning, and they're easier to eat. For this recipe, I see no reason to peel off that membrane on the inside. It'll actually help hold the meat together as they braise very soft. Real barbecue ribs are flavored on the inside by smoke. We're not going to do that, so I think it's good to do a garlicky marinade the night before. Just peel and chop some garlic, then we'll need some vinegar, and I'm going to marinate in a sealable bag, but you could use a bowl. First, I'll salt the meat. The salt is going to be dissolved in the marinade, thus making it a brininade, but I put salt directly on the meat so that I can use the meat as a visual guide as to how much salt they need. Just remember you'll lose some to the brine, so slightly over-season. Throw these in the bag, get the garlic in there. A big pinch of sugar is always great in brines or marinades, and then I'm using red wine vinegar, but you could use any vinegar or lime juice. And if you use a bag, you really don't need that much because the bag will wrap around the meat and keep everything in contact. I would dilute with a little water, maybe 1 part to 2 parts vinegar. If you marinate in straight vinegar or citrus overnight, it can make the surface of the meat go mushy. Push the air out, seal, and get that all stirred up. I'm getting the meaty side of the ribs facing down so that they're sure to be submerged. In the fridge they go, and good night. Next morning, I'll grab a little baking tray and throw in the drained ribs. I'm making some effort to scrape off the garlic. Its flavor is fixed in the meat. All those chunks are going to do now is burn, so who needs them? All right, I've got these positioned convex side up. No idea if that actually matters. It does matter for sure that you tightly crimp the foil around the top. The moisture inside the meat is more than enough to braise it if you capture the steam in there. I'm going to have my ribs with a twice-baked potato. That's a russet, a floury potato. And here's how I usually start baked potatoes. Coat the skin in a little oil and a lot of salt. This makes the skin very tasty to eat after it's baked crispy. Stab it a few times like your Norman Bates, just to let steam out and keep the skin from exploding. And I'm going to flavor that potato with roasted garlic, which means I'll need roasted garlic. If you just need a few cloves, an easy way is to cut off the root ends and leave the skin on. Throw them in a little scrap of foil, coat in a little oil, and then wrap them up tight. All of that can now go in the oven. The ribs, the little garlic pouch, and I like to bake potatoes right on the oven grates. They get crispy all around. Close that up and I'll bake at 300 Fahrenheit 150 C. That's a good compromise temperature for the potato and the meat, and it'll take about 3 hours. This is a weekend meal for sure. While you wait, just pour yourself a brew and read yourself some Morning Brew, the sponsor of this video. Having worked in news most of my career, I now avoid much of it, but Morning Brew doesn't make my head hurt like lots of other news. It's fun. It's a free daily newsletter on the latest in business, finance, and tech. I've been reading it now for about a year. Here's the new U.S. jobs report summed up in 5 sentences. Super quick, but still with context. Yeah, it's good news, but jobs in some sectors like entertainment are still way fewer than they were pre-COVID. Here's an indicator. More weddings this year than any year since 1984. I guess there's a backlog to work through. Mazel tov. Do you and me both a favor. Sign up for Morning Brew via my link in the description. It takes 2 seconds to sign up, and it's totally free in your email every day. Hit my link in the description. Thank you, Morning Brew. Now, after an hour or so, the garlic should be done roasting. When it's golden brown and soft, get that out before it burns. Baked potatoes are done when you pinch them and they're squishy. They usually take like an hour, but at this low temperature, it'll probably take as long as the meat takes. Here we are after 3 hours, and I just poke the meat. If I can push the meat fibers apart with my finger, then these are braised enough to fall off the bone. Though I don't actually want them to fall off yet. Gotta be gentle with these now. The potato is squishy. It's done. Here's all the juice and rendered fat from the ribs. I'm gonna pour that off and save it. I'll use some of it. At this point, I can just steal a little scrap of meat and taste it for seasoning. These need a little more salt, and now's a good time to put it on. Grab the potato in a little bowl, cut the potato in half, and just scoop out the flesh, being careful to not tear the skin. It helps to leave a thin, reinforcing wall of white flesh behind. We got plenty in the bowl, and just mash that however you normally mash potatoes. Normally, I'd enrich mashed potatoes with a lot of butter and loosen them with some milk. You could do that, but hey, we happen to have some delicious fat and liquid right here already. A spoon or two of rendered rib fat and some of that watery broth underneath just to get this to a smooth, moldable consistency. Roasted garlic, we cut the ends off the cloves, so now we can just squeeze out their guts like toothpaste. The stuff is divine. You can spread it on bread. It's sweet and not very pungent at all. Twice-baked potato filling is usually bound with a little bit of cheese. I'm grating in some pecorino, but any firm or semi-firm cheese would do. Stir all that in, get those garlic cloves mashed up, and then taste for seasoning. Needs a little more salt and plenty of pepper. Some fresh herb will look and taste nice. I'll scrape in a few thyme leaves there from Lauren's plant. Stir once more, and you could either split this filling between the two skins and have two thin potato pieces, or you could pile it all in one skin and have one nice tall potato piece. I'll do that. Don't need this other one now. This one will bake one more time, hence twice-baked potato. We'll also need a barbecue sauce for these ribs. Tomatoey barbecue sauce is usually either based on ketchup or on tomato paste and vinegar and sugar, which is ketchup. And because ketchup is strained or pulverized really fine, the texture you get from it is super smooth and glossy. I'll put in a spoonful of molasses, like Memphis-style barbecue sauce. You don't need it. A big squeeze of mustard is great, maybe some soy sauce. You can just stir random stuff into ketchup and taste it until you like it. A bunch of hot sauce in there. Then to evoke the taste of real smoked barbecue, you could put in some liquid smoke, or I'll just reach for smoked paprika, one of my favorite spices. Stir that up and have a taste. Could use some more smoky paprika, also some more pungency and more acid. Well, guess what hot sauce is? Chilies in vinegar. You could just use vinegar. Everything we've done until now, you could do way in advance. This last part is quick, and you'd do it right before dinner. Throw the ribs under the broiler, that very hot top element there. After a couple of minutes, you should start to smell some very intense roasted steak-like aromas. I'll pull those out and rotate them. No sauce for me yet. I want to dry out the surface texture a bit and get some nice dark brown flavor on these before I coat them in wet sugar. Can't brown them much after I do that. Now is a good time to throw in the potato. Again, I do it right on the grate to keep the skin dry and crispy. 2 or 3 minutes later, all sides of the ribs have browned, and now I'll put on some sauce. You can just spoon it on, but a brush allows you to paint on a very thin layer, which is what I want. I want a thin layer that will dry under the broiler. Keep an eye on it. Sugar burns very fast under the old grill. After a couple of minutes, I'll paint on a second thin layer. It's kind of like building a piano finish in woodworking. Paint on some lacquer, dry it, sand it down, paint on another layer. This will get us lots of concentrated flavor from the sauce, and the ribs won't be all wet and gloppy. They'll be sticky. Get all those sides, which we can access because the ribs are already cut into individual bones. Whole intact racks are just more convenient when you're feeding a bunch of people. You can flip and baste them all together in one big piece, but for a portion or two, pre-cut ribs are great. Here's our beef-flavored twice-baked potato. Awfully nice crust on that. And after just a couple more minutes under the grill, check out how tight and dry these ribs look. I love that laminated finish. You could always have more of your sauce on the side. Some more thyme on there just for pretty. Might seem like a huge portion, but remember, like half the mass here is bone and gristle that you'll leave behind. And we've cooked these so soft that the meat just slides off the other stuff into your mouth. But again, I was careful to not let the meat actually fall off the bone. To me, there's no point in ribs if you can't gnaw them off the bone yourself like a cave person. Sure, the flavor isn't the same as real barbecue ribs that you smoked outside all day. These are very different, but still very good and way, way easier.